I'm Kim Souza. This is Supply Side Digital. I'm here with Keith Anderson, Senior Vice President of Strategy with Boston-based Profitero. Tell us, Keith, about Profitero and your role there.
Great to be with you, Kim. Thanks for having me. Profitero is an e-commerce analytics solution provider that partners with manufacturers all over the world. I lead strategy, which covers product strategy, and I lead a team of analysts that works with our clients to help them maximize performance. So my career has been spent working with retailers and suppliers, many of which are focused on Walmart.
Perfect. Well, let's start with something that we see a lot from Walmart and big box today, omni-channel. There's a big push for omni-channel, and with that, there's some concern in the manufacturing supplier community that pushing these products online, perhaps grocery and CPG, they're concerned about the Amazon effect and the race to the bottom with margins. Talk to us a little bit about that, what you're hearing, and some strategies that you recommend to prevent the race to the bottom.
Sure. I think this question of are we pushing it or is it being pulled is an important starting point. I think at this point, categories migrating online, including grocery and CPG, is pretty inevitable. And so the question is, are you going to participate or not participate? There's no question, not just what we're hearing, but we collect data on prices on millions of products. We publish some studies quarterly, and it's very clear over the last few years the price gaps between Amazon and other retailers have narrowed. And there is a lot of algorithmic pricing and dynamic pricing that sometimes leads to unsustainable pricing, and some might argue irrational. So,
in the course of a day, how many times can a price change?
Well, we see on image items, some really visible high household penetration items, it can change as often as every 15 minutes.
Wow.
But that's actually less common than most people believe. It's not that every item has prices changing that dynamically. But the reality is there is a bit of an arms race. Retailers are investing in technologies to monitor each other's prices, both online and in-store.
Right.
They're sometimes matching unit pricing. So it doesn't matter what the pack configuration is. They want to match, for example, at the diaper level. And they often are matching competitors' promoted prices with their everyday shelf price. And so I think it is sensible to have open eyes and some concerns about how sustainable this is. You asked what suppliers can do, and I think there's a couple things that are in your control and some that are not.
Okay.
What's in your control is making sure that you're managing your own supply chain as tightly as you can, because sometimes it's liquidation or closeout inventory that triggers some of what's happening between retailers. And secondly, just looking broadly at the cost structure of your supply to make sure that you're managing things both on the revenue side of the equation and on the cost side of the equation as carefully as you can. But over the longer term, there's no question, just blunt, brute force price matching is not going to be economically sustainable for retailers or for suppliers. And so I've actually been heartened to see over the last few quarters or even year and a half some more thoughtful, potentially more sustainable approaches to pricing, offering incentives for in-store pickup, charging for the convenience of delivering to your doorstep. The thinking behind Jet's Smart Cart, which makes a lot of those economic trade-offs that historically retailers and suppliers have had to grapple with behind the scenes, they're now basically making those trade-offs.
Putting it in the consumer's hands.
Yeah, exactly right. So that it's really up to the consumer what they're willing to pay for with either their time or their money. So I think as a supplier or a retailer, frankly, experimenting with those kinds of things and supporting them when they're effective is the right thing to do for the long term.
And for a lot of the CPG companies, omni-channel, the ordering online and picking up in store is a relatively new thing. There's been some hesitant. Walmart's been beating the drum, get your content in order, do these things. You've got to be recognizable online. Can you give us just a short checklist of where suppliers need to be right now if they're going to play in the online space? And you said they have to play to be relevant.
I think so. And we spent a little time at a conference yesterday talking about where the industry is and where it should be.
Sure.
And I think it's always important to start with defining what success means. And so Walmart clearly has their own definition of success, and they're inviting suppliers, pressuring suppliers to complete scorecards and checklists
Sure.
of their own. And so as a supplier, you've got to decide, is that what success looks like for us, or do we want to support that to the degree that we can, but we maybe have other objectives and goals of our own? Is the objective really to support the relationship with Walmart and be there to play? Or do we see this as a growth opportunity? We want to be not just showing up, but we want to win. And so once you've defined success, both with Walmart and maybe more broadly across your business,
Mm-hmm.
It's good to have a sense for what your brand's objectives are more broadly. That sets you up to decide what to do next. So next, you got to make sure you know who is going to be responsible for doing this, which frankly is one of the biggest challenges on many customer teams
Yeah.
at Walmart and others. Who owns this, and do they have the adequate tools and resources to actually do what needs to be done?
Right.
And then finally, I think, in almost every case, what you could do or what you're being asked to do is going to outstrip what you have the capacity to do. And that means you've got to prioritize. In other words, things like getting your content updated, it's essential. But there's a lot of content. And depending on the size of your portfolio, it may be
That you have to.
yeah, by the end of a month or something, it may be more than you can manage.
Sure.
So a stretch goal can really be useful for creating a sense of urgency and motivating
Okay.
a company to mobilize and get ready. But the key, I think, is prioritize and focus. Think about the items within your portfolio that are the most important, either do the highest velocity today or have the highest potential. Identify the content fields that are most important, things like your primary image and your title, which is what shows up on a search result page or a
Right.
category page before somebody even sees the product page itself. And then, be sure that you've got the right team in place, whether it's in-house or you're enlisting the support of agencies or partners to really accelerate getting the work done.
There's certainly a lot of partners out there offering those services. All right, let's switch gears and let's talk about voice commerce. That is something that's picking up some steam. Tell us a little bit about your work in voice commerce, what you've discovered, and who's winning that race at this point. What do we have to look forward to there?
Sure. I mean, it's been an incredible phenomenon, and I can look back over the last decade, and there have been at least a dozen technologies hyped as game-changing, but I think voice caught many people, including me, by surprise in how quickly it reached relatively mainstream adoption and the impact it's already had on commerce. So I would argue, despite all that growth, it's still really early.
Sure.
And most of us associate voice commerce with the smart speaker category, and Amazon unquestionably dominates that category. And so in that context, Amazon is ahead.
Okay.
Google is certainly gaining grounds, and they've got a different, I think, more open, in some ways, network. But what I think most people are missing is voice commerce is not going to be purely about voice input and voice output. And what I mean by that is, if you've got an Echo or a Google Home speaker, there's no screen involved.
Right.
And so you speak and the speaker speaks back. But if you look even at Amazon's growing family of Echo-enabled devices, some of them have screens.
They have the screens, yeah.
And the truth is, even laptops and phones have microphones. And so voice input and screen output, I think, is going to happen sooner than people appreciate. And what that may mean is a lot of the fears, there have been some really widely distributed articles saying, if people search and they don't search for your product, isn't Amazon just going to promote
Substitute
a private
their
label?
own
Yeah,
private
substitute
label.
a private label. And if there's only one result returned in a voice input, voice output scenario, aren't we doomed?
Right, because we don't shop by we don't shop by Tide or Gain. We shop by detergent or not
Sure.
peanut butter. We say peanut butter, not Jif.
Yeah, either a
How do they recognize
category-oriented
that?
term or a product attribute or benefit. I'm
Right.
looking for gluten-free, or I'm looking for.
Okay.
And so one positive development on that front, there's a designation for products called Amazon's Choice,
Right.
which tends to be the product that's returned in a voice query. And they've actually just over the last 10 days or so started revealing on the detail page itself why a product gets that
Okay.
designation. And it's not as many people suspected,
So if you're a supplier, you really want to be that choice
you do.
in a category that you serve.
You do. And
How
I
can-
also think you want to experience, well, so how can you get it?
Yeah.
As it's just been revealed, it appears to be a function of the return rate. So they don't want people buying and then returning the product. Reviews are a big part of it.
Okay.
And then it's relevance. I suspect there are more factors than the 3 that are being displayed. But I think even more broadly, it's really important right now to be experimenting with and innovating in voice input, screen output approaches that ultimately present a shopper with more information and more choice. So to the extent that there is going to be just a single product or suggestion returned, Amazon's Choice or whichever retailer, you really want to understand how the algorithm identifies which product it's going to reply with. But more importantly, I think over the long term, we want to be looking for the models of interaction that give shoppers more info, more choice, and that's only going to happen if there's screen output.
Screens. So where do you see the saturation level for voice? We're not there yet, I don't think. Where do you see that topping out?
I really don't know.
know?
No, I mean, I think it is certainly becoming more ambient, to resurrect a term that we used to use 10 years ago that I haven't heard for a long time. But I think, right now most people associate voice with the speaker that's sitting in the kitchen or maybe in the bedroom or wherever it is. And I think you're going to start to see more and more devices enabled, and they're going to be a little more seamlessly integrated with things that we're already doing. And so that might mean that a huge increase in interactions is ahead of us over the next few years. But it's really tough to imagine or quantify it at this stage.
Okay, our last question here. Over the next 4 to 5 years, we've seen retail literally turned upside down. What are we going to see from the retail perspective? Do you see fewer stores? Do you see the lines being blurred more between retailer and supplier, them actually competing more online? Kind of walk us through what you see happening in the next 3 to 5 years.
I do see, painting with the broadest strokes, I expect there will be fewer stores. I expect there will be some smaller stores. I think that stores are being repurposed in a lot of ways. Some carrying less inventory and getting more experiential. Others becoming picking centers or pickup points. And then secondly, are the lines blurring between retailer and supplier? I think they are, but just as I don't really see this threat of a retail apocalypse being quite what it's been hyped to be, there will be fewer stores, there will be smaller stores, but stores aren't going away. They're going to evolve. I certainly see retailers getting more sophisticated in the brands that they are developing and managing.
Sure.
And I certainly see manufacturers getting more sophisticated in their ability to go direct to consumer. But there's a lot of structural reasons why there are limits to both of those. On the direct to consumer side, I think it's a really interesting and high potential strategy for a new brand that isn't already widely distributed and hasn't sort of hit the ceiling in terms of relevance that you can have as a purely direct-to-consumer brand. But actually, if you look at all these direct-to-consumer brands, every one of them has hit that ceiling and either gone to brick and mortar for distribution, or they've been acquired by a larger manufacturer that manages a bigger portfolio and can help them get broader distribution. And I think that's because no matter how compelling a brand is, shoppers generally are looking to consolidate their consumption, where they're not just going to buy one brand or buy one category for every transaction. They want to go look at different categories, different choices within a category.
They want choices.
Yeah, they want choice. And so the aggregation that a retailer does is pretty important to the way consumers behave. And I think you're certainly going to see a little co-opetition.
Co-opetition.
And I didn't coin that term, but I do think it's part of the reality that's ahead.
Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation provides electric energy across 2/3 of Arkansas. This is an exciting time in our energy history, with incredible progress being made in renewable energy and storage technologies. As our energy portfolio continues to diversify, we'll maintain an all-the-above strategy to provide reliable and affordable electricity. Ever since the first light bulbs were placed in our members' homes, the electric cooperatives have been the solutions provider for our members, and we want to continue that well into the future.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.